What's cracking, big dogs? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the HQ. My name is Nicholas. This is BDGE. Big dogs gotta eat fantasy football. Today we're looking at early round running backs. And I'm not necessarily going to break down guys that I don't want you to draft or guys I don't think you should draft. But listen, we all have biases. Some guys like some running backs other than I like them, and vice versa. We can all agree on, though, there are some riskier running backs. Whether you are more risk averse in the early rounds or you like to shoot for upside, this is where a video like this comes into play for you, right? I think it's good to be objective and unbiased when looking at everyone, let alone your early round picks, but especially your early round picks, right? And if you've played fantasy football for long enough, then you've probably heard the phrase at one point or another, you can't win your fantasy league in the first round, second round, third round, but you could definitely lose it within the first couple rounds. What that means is every player picked within, the first round, second round-ish, maybe the third round, they're all going to be really good fantasy players. They're all going to be studs at their respective positions usually among the top 10 at their position. So they're all going to be really good. Everyone drafting in those first couple rounds is going to be getting really good players. It's very rare that one player transcends every other player at their position and literally wins the league for you. That very, 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 very rarely, if ever, happens, so you don't bank on that. However, when you say you can lose your league within the first couple rounds, if you draft a bust with one of your first or second round picks, or you draft a guy who gets injured or something like that, that is going to put you into an absolutely massive hole, right? And you're going to be falling behind everyone else who got good players that are playing in their lineups in those early rounds, because that is the core of your fantasy team, right? Especially when you're drafting in season long, because you have 1 year, you get these guys for that year. If they fuck up, boom, you're done for that year. Whereas Dynasty, you could flip things, you could at least, plan for the future, whatever. And it's one of the biggest lessons I've learned over the past year or two is to be more risk averse over the first few rounds of your draft, right? Especially in season leagues. You want to shoot for upside, but I think you should do that later in drafts. Because again, everybody being picked in the first couple rounds is going to be a very good fantasy player. They all have very good upside. So if they hit, they're going to be really good, but that is also the outlook for all these players. So the less risky you get in the first couple rounds, the more consistency and the more weeks you're going to win just because of that floor that you're giving your team, right? You want to make sure that your best players, the guys that are accounting for like 50, 60, 70% of your weekly fantasy points on a weekly basis, are actually there to do that for you. If you don't, you're in trouble, right? And I went back, as always, we got the big facts, we gather some stats. And if you're enjoying the video, if you do enjoy the video, if you get some value informationally, entertainment, whatever the it is, make sure you hit that thumbs up button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're new, because we're hitting you with everything 2019 fantasy football from this point forward for the rest of my life. Here's the kicker. I went back over the last 5 years. I wanted to look at fantasy running backs because we always hear like they're super risky. The turnover rate is really high. They always bust, and compare it to other wide receivers, or compared to wide receivers being picked in that area. So I wanted to get some data behind that. I always hit you with the big facts and big facts only. We look back over the last 5 years. We looked at ADP data, average draft position data over the last 5 years, and I looked at the finishes of running backs in fantasy football. On average, over the last 5 seasons, 50% of running backs drafted as a top 12 fantasy running back in any particular year finish outside of the top 12 at the end of the year. So 6 of the top 12 running backs drafted this year will not finish inside the top 12 on average. It could be 8, it could be 4, we don't know, but that's the average of the last 5 years. On average, 4.2 will finish outside of the top 18. So of the top 12 running backs drafted, on average, 4.2 of them will finish outside of the top 18. On average, 3.5 of them will finish outside of the top 24. And realistically, if you're drafting a top 12 running back, I would say anything outside of the top 18 is a bust, right? Because if you're drafting a guy in the top 12 amongst the running back position, you're using your first or second round pick on them. That's where running backs go that early. I know it jumps up quick, right? The top 12 running backs should be scattered throughout the first 4 rounds, but that's not how it goes anymore. So if you pick someone who's a top 12 back, right, the RB10, and he finishes the RB19, it technically doesn't kill your team, but that's a huge loss because you need top 10 numbers in order to sustain any kind of point advantage over your competitors. And speaking of these guys, right, some of them were due to injuries, if not the large majority of them. Some simply were just not good. They couldn't maintain it over the entire season, and some fell just into running back by committees due to their poor play or coaches. Whatever the case, these are the facts. These are the big facts derived from manual research straight from these fingers. Today, we are going to look at the riskiest running back picks inside the first 3 rounds of 2019 fantasy football drafts. The ADP that I gathered here is from the FFPC, which is high stakes leagues. These are legit. These are redraft leagues, so you're not going to get more accurate ADP data than what I have bringing to y'all. These are from the last 2 weeks of drafting, so they're also not skewed for things that happened back in April or something like that, pre-NFL draft. Right now, there are 18 running backs being taken within the first 3 rounds of draft. So literally half of the picks, if you're in a 12-team league, 18 out of the first 36, which is the first 3 rounds, are running backs. Every RB1, so the top 12 running backs, are being taken at 208 or earlier. So like I said, if you're using a pick on a top 12 running back, that means you have just used it on one of the first 1.5 rounds of a fantasy football draft. You don't want to use a pick that early on someone who is likely to bust. With all the big facts being said, make sure, again, you subscribe to the channel if you are new. Leave a rating and review if you are on iTunes, and subscribe to the podcast. Hit that thumbs up button if you're on YouTube. I love you for joining me. And let's get into the guts of the video. We're going to kind of break this down into guys that are the highest risk, in my opinion, and then have like a medium risk and then maybe like a lower-ish level of risk. If you've been enjoying the videos, though, I do a private live stream every Saturday where I'll answer your personal questions. That is for my Patreons. So if you head over to patreon.com/BDGE, that's also where you'll get my weekly in-season rankings. So if you're looking for more personalized advice to you, your league, or just things you're randomly curious about, head over to patreon.com, become a patron. This Saturday, I will be doing another Patreon live stream. I've been doing them bi-weekly throughout the entire summer, and then when we're in season, I do them every single week. So I help you with your sit starts and whatnot. Also this Saturday, speaking of, I'll be going to the Fantasy Footballers show. They are playing in Gramercy Theater in New York City. We're going to do a live meetup prior to their show at 6 o'clock at the Gramercy Ale House, which is, I don't know, look it up on Google. It's in the area. So if you are going, drop a comment and meet us there at 6 o'clock. Myself, Snacks, and Animal will be probably pounding margaritas, and it should be a good time. So number 1 on this list, we have Todd Gurley of the Los Angeles Rams. It should be of no surprise. At this point, there is just so much speculation and so many things flying around the rumor mill with Gurley and his knee. I'm confident in saying that my channel was the first place in the industry, the entire fantasy football industry, to tell you to stop drafting Todd Gurley in the first round of fantasy drafts, right? So if you were in best ball, probably saved you a lot of money. While other people were picking him at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, you were fading him, right? And this is because we had Dr. Jesse Morse, a legitimate doctor. Gurley arthritis. What exactly does that mean going forward? Is that easy to take care of, and will he still be able to play at a very high level? So so he is not a top 5 pick for you, is he?
No, you can't put steroids into this guy's knee every couple weeks or every couple months. That's not good for his cartilage. That's not good for his knee. So now you start talking about stem cell and PRP and these other types of injections. And yes, they really work. I do them in my office, but they're not going to make his knee pre-injury. It's not going to happen.
Jeez.
So the issue is, yes, his knee may be good for 70% of the season, but when is that other 30% going to come? The issue is there's no good surgery to fix this.
It's nice when I can get another doctor outside of myself onto the channel to talk about these things so you guys can actually believe them. I don't know why you don't believe me. Dr. Jesse Morse told us that this arthritis thing is a very, 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 very big deal. Everything you knew, or everything you thought you knew about Todd Gurley, about Georgia Todd Gurley, about Todd Gurley 2015, 2017, 2018, that doesn't matter anymore. That is a thing of the past. He is a soon-to-be 25-year-old running back with arthritis. You hate to see it. You really hate to see it. The problem with it, as Dr. Morse said on the channel, is that it's not going away. It's not something you can completely evaporate from your body. You can treat it. You can try to minimize it. You can let it rest, but it does not completely heal, and it never will. So much of the problem you hear with people saying, are you still buying, you should still be buying Todd Gurley because even if you take away 25% of his raw production, he's still a top 9 running back or whatever. That's not how this is going to work, and that's the problem. So what I wanted to do was kind of put a timeline to everything that's happened with Gurley to really break this down and see what angle we're coming from, how risky he really is, and where we should be targeting him in fantasy drafts. I made this timeline, pretty much just going to read it off to you, so stay with me and look at the good side of me. Week 15 of last year, Gurley leaves the game with a knee injury. We find out that it's knee inflammation and it's day-to-day. Day-to-day turns into week-to-week. He misses 2 weeks, week 17 and week 16 leading into the playoffs. Obviously, that was probably rest, and it might not have been a big deal at the time. Gurley comes back for the playoff, that first playoff game. He has a really strong game against Dallas in the divisional playoff round. Goes for 118 yards from scrimmage and a touchdown on 18 touches. 18 touches is significant because C.J. Anderson out-touched him 23-18. Fast forward, after that game, he was taken off the injury report. They tell you that he is fully healthy, the knee inflammation is completely gone. The $60 million man, Todd Gurley, is 100% healthy for this NFC Championship game. He gets 5 touches. C.J. Anderson gets 17 touches. Gurley's 5 touches, $12 million per touch if you look at the contract. The guy who they just signed off the street 2 weeks earlier, C.J. Anderson, out-touches the $60 million man 17-5. We know the rest. He doesn't get many touches in the Super Bowl. The team kind of falls apart, and all the questions start whirling around. We fast forward to this offseason. Reports are all over the place. TMZ has a video with Gurley limping throughout L.A., but he and the staff are saying that he's fully healthy and there are absolutely no problems. We're hearing nothing from the Rams. We're hearing nothing but good things from Todd Gurley, and he's ready to go. He might undergo stem cell surgery for the knee, and that's not normally a long-term solution. Someone might be able to speak on that better. I've actually had a stem cell shot in my lower back, and I promise you, one thing you should not do is compete in a dunk contest on an 8-foot rim the day after having a stem cell shot in your back. That shit hurts. That shit is like the size of a phone, the needle they put into your back. I remember I was lying stomach down, and they're like, "You ready?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm ready." They shoot it up, and my legs like shot up like a scorpion, like if I had a scorpion tail going around. Anyways, it has nothing to do with Todd Gurley. They might use stem cell treatment. That does not completely fix the problem. Like I said, this arthritis is not going away. Then the reports start coming out that he does in fact have arthritis, even though I thought we had already confirmed that for a long time, but now they are being reported. And the reports of him being done as a bell cow start to surface. And that was absolutely confirmed by the moves that the Rams made this offseason. Matching Malcolm Brown's offer sheet, trading up into the 3rd round to draft Earl Henderson, the 3rd running back off the board, should really have told you all you needed to know. The problem with Gurley is exactly what happened in week 15, where out of nowhere, the knee became inflamed, and then he misses 2 games, and then his touches after that game are all over the map, right? They're 18, they're 5, they're 12. With the arthritis, the inflammation can come back at any time during the season. So it's obviously smart to keep him off the field for this entire preseason, which is what they're doing, and that's telling you that they are nervous that it could inflame at any point. The more time he spends against these big NFL defenders, the more likely it's bound to happen, and his knee is going to rise up and inflame, and then cause him to be a huge headache on your fantasy team. And dude, these NFL defenders are going to be targeting that knee. They're going to be targeting that arthritis. So just if you think they're good people, I mean, there might be good people, but they're still going to be going after that knee. They want Todd Gurley off the field. The question and the problem is, when does the knee start to inflame again? Is it week 1? Is it week 3? Is it week 10? Is it week 16? I don't know. The only way I see this playing out is in one of 2 ways for Gurley, right? They continue to use him as a bell cow, and if they do that, they throw him right back into the bell cow mix, which we've heard reports that they're not going to do that, but if they do, I think the knee will flame up very, very, very quickly. He'll be out of your lineup sooner rather than later. The other thing they could do is mitigate the risk as much as possible, which is what they're doing. The reason they're not going to have him practice, the reason they're not going to have him play in any preseason games, lower his workload. So instead of becoming the 20 to 25 touch per game guy that we've known him as, he's now somewhere within like the 13 to 18 touches per game running back, which obviously that inherently just lowers the ceiling, and you don't want a guy like that as your 1st round pick, probably not your 2nd round pick. You want someone who's going to get a more voluminous workload, right? So that lowers his ceiling right away and probably lowers his floor too. But that also does not guarantee him staying healthy. He's still very much at risk of having that knee inflame at any point during the season. And when and if that happens, you're going to be looking at not only probably missed games, but like how confident are you going to be in starting him, right? Say he plays for 5 weeks and gets 18 touches a game, doing awesome, and all of a sudden you hear reports the knee is inflamed. He misses the next week. Oh, but he's going to be active the week after that. Are you confident in putting him back in your lineup that following week? This is what's going to happen. Probably not. Maybe he gets 8 touches that game, and then the next game he gets 12, and then maybe the next game after that he gets 20, right? It's so much more than just looking at the raw stats and saying, oh, if they take out 25% of his workload, then he's still the RB9, because that's very unlikely what's going to happen. It's not just black and white. These injuries all need to be taken into context. So I think he's going to be an absolute headache. I mean, there is a 3rd option, right, in here, and you can just assume he's perfectly fine and nothing changes. More power to you. I highly doubt that's going to happen, right? So with that being said, Gurley is probably off my board completely within the first 3 rounds of draft. Like I said, I want to be as risk averse as possible. I do not want to be drafting guys that are going to become headaches, that are going to miss a lot of time, because that is such a detriment to your team and puts you at such a disadvantage over your league mates. So if you take Gurley with your second round pick and the knee predictably acts up, you're going to be kicking yourself and you're going to be like, damn, I knew what was happening. Like, I literally knew what we were dealing with already. So Gurley to me is one of the, we're going by ADP in order right now, so I'm not sure necessarily I'd put him at the highest risk of any running back, but he is one of the highest risks for running backs. Real quick on Darrell Henderson and Malcolm Brown. The thing with Darrell Henderson, dude, he's going so early now in drafts. He's becoming like a 5th round best ball pick. And I think that's a huge mistake. One, because Gurley is still going to be very much in the mix. And they already said that they view Henderson as more of like a Kamara level back. So he's not getting the workhorse. Even if Gurley's out, it's going to be a timeshare between Henderson and Malcolm Brown. Malcolm Brown, I've been getting Malcolm Brown in like the 15th round of best ball drafts, and it's incredible. He's going to be like the Mark Ingram in this scenario, and this is an offense very much like the Saints, who get a ton of goal line carries. They get a ton of just valuable touches for that workhorse role running back. Malcolm Brown has the size to be a workhorse, and they've even said it from their camp. So right now, they're like a 10-round difference, and I would much rather have Malcolm Brown in the 14th, 15th than Darrell Henderson in the 5th. So that's my stance on this, and I really wouldn't be looking at Gurley any earlier than probably the 4th round. If you want all of my do not draft players, if you want 40 injury profiles written up from Dr. Jesse Moore, straight from the Don's fingertips, they will be in my draft guide, which launches in 5 days from now. I'm super excited. I've been working on it for like 2 months. BigDogsDraftGuide.com. That is where the season-long guide will host itself. You can go purchase it now. It launches July 1st. It has my do not draft list, the busts, sleepers, my top 250 big board, rankings by position, by tiers, PPR, standard, half PPR, accessible on the phone, accessible on the computer, on the tablet, plus like a million other really cool tools that I've been working on. Market share tool to give you a glimpse at, who had the highest market share in terms of like red zone touches, 10 zone targets, overall targets, 40-plus yard receptions. It's got like everything in there. It's got consistency tools. Like, I've been really working my ass off on this one. You guys are really, 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 really going to enjoy this one, I promise. Easily the best draft guide I've put out to date. It will be the only thing that you guys literally need for your 2019 fantasy football season. Go cop it now, BigDogsDraftGuide.com. Let's move on to the next guy, and it's Leonard Fournette of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Current ADP, running back 14 at the 305 spot. So he's in the 3rd round, but he's still a top 14 running back. This goes no further than his injury risk and his injury history. And as I always say, you take this into context. People who drafted Leonard Fournette last year, I was very high on Fournette, and I was telling people to draft him. Fortunately for me, I didn't end up with a single Fournette share in any of my redraft leagues. But for those who drafted him in the 1st round, which is where you had to take him, he absolutely killed your team. And he's dealt with so many injuries throughout his NFL career so far, both his rookie year and last year, and going back to his college years. It's a recurring theme, and when you look at these injuries, not every injury is the same, right? It's not like every player is a 50-50 injury risk. Fournette is actually, Dr. Jesse Morse, one of the things he wrote in Fournette's write-up is that there are 3 players on his do not draft list completely this year. I won't give you the other 2 because it's in the draft guide, but Leonard Fournette is one of them, and he puts Leonard Fournette's injury rating, the 2009 injury risk rating, at a 9 out of 10. With Fournette's injuries he's dealt with, they're all these lower leg injuries. And the injuries specifically that he's dealt with going back to college are ones that have started to deteriorate, like the ligaments and the muscles within his ankle and foot and that structure down there. I don't know all the terms for it, but Dr. Morse has said it before on my channel that these injuries are more predictive than unlucky or fluky. A lot of guys have fluky injuries, right? And we'll talk about like Dalvin Cook in a little bit because people compare the two. But Fournette, there's a reason why he keeps re-injuring it, is because the area where he keeps getting injured is actually deteriorating, and it's making it more predictive that other injuries are going to occur. So it's a very high injury risk for him going into this next year. Nobody is fucking arguing that when Leonard Fournette is on the field, he's going to get the touches. And they're like, oh, he's going to be more involved in the receiving game. He's already been very involved in the receiving game. When he is on the field, he's getting anywhere from like 3 to 5 targets a game. We all know the workload that he's getting in this backfield if he is on the field. No one is arguing that. I'm not arguing that. The problem is when people say if he plays 16 games, like the chances of that happening are not high whatsoever. He is very, very, very much huge injury risk. And, it goes back to what I was saying with Gurley. It's like if he misses time and then he comes back, do you feel confident putting him right back into your lineup? He keeps rushing himself to get back in, and that's why he keeps re-injuring his stuff, right? The hamstring injury last year that kept lingering. He wasn't fully rested, and then they go back in. One thing I always do, if I have an injured running back and he is set to return in a given week, I want to see 3 full practices out of him. I want him to be on the field for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or if they do a walkthrough Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. You know what I'm saying. If he is limited, if he's not practicing whatsoever, and then maybe gets in a limited practice on Friday and does the walkthrough on Saturday, he's not going in my lineup because he is not 100% fully healthy. And I did a study earlier this offseason breaking down the numbers on people who miss multi-week injuries and what their next following game is like when they finally come back in. The volume and the efficiency and the receiving workload are always down by like 20 to 25%. So even if he misses 2 games, that third game he's back, he's not giving you that high-end RB1 number that you drafted him for, right? He's probably going to be more of like an RB2. And that's not why you draft guys in the first 3 rounds. So Fournette, for as much value as you're getting from him, if he's in your lineup, sure, the injury risk is just so high that he's not going to be on my board because you could still get really, really solid wide receivers at this spot. You can get a Marlon Mack, you can get an Aaron Jones, you can get a Kerryon Johnson, who may not have the absolute workhorse upside of Fournette, but they're a lot less risky and a lot more likely to be in your lineup for the full 16 games. So Fournette would be my number 2 guy. Third guy, you guys have heard me fucking talk about him more than enough, is Devonta Freeman of the Atlanta Falcons. Running back 17, right now the 311. So at the end of the 3rd round, and he was going much earlier on draft. This is from the FFPC, but I think on draft.com, as little as a couple weeks ago, he was like the 20 to 23rd pick. So he's going super early. And listen, if you guys think I'm being biased, I'm literally a Falcons fan. I've watched so much of Devonta Freeman, and my problem has always been the fact that he is small in size, and that's not necessarily a knock for people for me. It's not like someone to cross off my list because he's small in size. He runs like he's big. He runs like he's 225, 230, and can take those hits from the linebackers, and we've seen those injuries pile up for him now. It's not just the concussion. One more concussion, and Devonta Freeman could literally be out for the entire year. He has multiple concussions that are official. We have no idea how many unofficial there are. And the way he runs at such a small size and putting his head down and trying to be violent is a cause for these concussions, right? It's not fluky that I think he keeps getting these. So he's 1 concussion away from really being out for the entire season, if not for a very long period of the season. And now he's had a bunch of these lower leg injuries, MCL, PCL, all of these sprains and whatever that's going on, and he's missed a lot of time. And it's not very often that, I know he's still relatively young, but it's not very often that you see someone, a running back in the NFL, peak and then miss a significant portion of time and then come back and then hit a peak at a later age, right? So with Freeman, the other thing is, like, people are also just saying, oh, if he's on the field, he's going to be a stud. But the last time he was on the field, like really on the field for a long period of time during 2017, he was only getting 16 and a half touches a game. Like, that was his weekly average touch total, right? In 2015, his big breakout year, he was getting 22 and a half touches a game. But guys, that was like 4 or 5 years ago at this point. And that's what I think people think are going to happen with Freeman. 22 and a half touches a game. The next year, 2016, when he was still a stud in fantasy, that dropped down to 17 and a half touches per game. 2017, it was down to 16 and a half touches per game. So you're seeing the touch total go down and down and down. And the most significant part of that touch total that's being brought down is the receiving workload. He's seeing less and less and less receiving work in this offense. And that's a huge concern for me because anyone being picked within the first couple rounds, you really want to see them have a high receiving workload because they need to compete with these other guys who are going to be getting that receiving workload. With Freeman, we're seeing that number come down significantly year over year, and now they bring in Dirk Cutter. And Dirk Cutter does not pass to his running backs. I believe there was a stat, and I don't have it in my notes right now, but it was like going back to 2016 or 2015, Dan Quinn has not had an entire group of running backs see more than like a 16% target share in an offense since 2016 or 15. Same thing with Dirk Cutter. I think that number was at like 15% market share. That's really, 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 really low. And Dirk Cutter is a guy who takes a lot of shots downfield but does not dump off to his running backs. And we have a sample size of when Dirk Cutter was the offensive coordinator here in Atlanta, 2014, which was Devonta Freeman's rookie year. So take that as it may, it was his rookie year, but he was placed behind a 31-year-old Steven Jackson. He was in a battle with Jacquizz Rodgers at the time. Devonta Freeman averaged like 3.8 yards per carry and less than 7.5 yards per reception. So none of the numbers were efficient. He couldn't beat these guys out in camp. And Dirk Cutter just used them miserably. And he's just historically not good with his running backs. So I worry that Devonta Freeman's going to turn into a two-down grinder. They also drafted this kid, Quadri Allison, out of Pittsburgh, who had multiple good years at Pittsburgh. He was behind James Conner for a couple of years. But like some of the stuff that he does, and given his size, he is a big boy with really good breakaway speed, and that's kind of what you look for in a two-down grinder. I'm not saying this guy's going to become the workhorse, but if there's going to be someone that breaks, that actually eats into someone like Freeman's workload, which again, I think is going to be a 2-down grinder work set. It's going to be someone like this, 6'1", 228, runs in the 76th percentile for weight adjusted speed score, had multiple good years in college, was productive. Again, just big. Who knows if he's going to get the goal line work? He's 20 pounds heavier than Freeman. And then Ito Smith. I know Ito Smith was not good last year. He did not look good on tape. But I also don't think Ito Smith is going to work into this workload, right? I think that would be Allison, if anyone. Ito Smith is a very, very, very good pass catcher. And that's the thing. Coming out of college, he was one of the top pass catching backs in the NCAA, like in that draft class. He had a 88th percentile college target share, most comparable to Shane Vereen. Was also very good on the ground with a 77th percentile college dominator rating. So he was not only rushing or receiving the ball at a very high level, but also rushing. So he could do it all. I know, again, it was really bad last year, but the offensive line completely fell off for the Falcons. No one looked good running in that offense last year. Not Coleman, not Ito Smith, not Devonta Freeman. So my concerns for Freeman are twofold. They're, one, I just don't think he can sustain the type of play that he did with the way he runs. I think his lower leg injuries are piling up at a very fast rate. I think that the concussion history is very scary as well. And I don't think he's going to get that much receiving work because we've seen him go down. We see Dan Quinn come out and say Ito Smith is going to be a very big part of this offense this year, and I would assume it's going to be in the passing game. So that being said, yes, I know Tevin Coleman is gone, so I try to be unbiased here, which opens up just more work in the backfield overall. There's just a lot of things I see that hold me back from wanting to draft Devonta Freeman anywhere near his ADP. So those are my 3 highest risk guys within the first 3 rounds. Again, I want to go through a couple other running backs that I'd say are medium risk. I'm not going to go too into depth with them. I would say Le'Veon Bell is on this list just because of where he landed. I don't think the volume is a risk, but we've also seen like David Johnson last year got a shitload of touches in a bad offense and it did not work out well for him. So Le'Veon Bell could be someone that gets 350 touches but is super inefficient because this offense might not score a lot. They don't have a good offensive line, and Adam Gase has been absolutely miserable managing running backs. He's just someone that I think is a little bit riskier on the other variables, not so much volume. And then you have Damien Williams, Kansas City Chiefs. Tiny sample size. He has never played. He's been in the league for 5 years already. He's never played a full 16 games. He has never had more than 50 carries in a regular season before. He was an undrafted free agent. He's 27 years old. Easily replaceable in this Chiefs offense, right? We've seen this backfield just churn through running backs. They all play successfully. So if he gets injured or if he struggles and someone steps up and gets in there, like say Damien Williams gets hurt in like week 3, Carlos Hyde comes in and goes for like 127 total yards and then 89 total yards and a touchdown. Like, I don't think Damien Williams just comes back in to be the workhorse immediately. So I think there are a lot of red flags when it comes to Damien Williams. He is still ranked inside my RB1 rankings. The upside is absolutely there, but again, I think he's definitely a medium risk. On the flip side, we have James Conner for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I would rate him more in like the medium to low risk. I think the volume will be good there. We've always seen Pittsburgh use a workhorse, but I think they like Jalen Samuels a lot, and I think he's going to lose some passing down work to him. We saw when he came back from his injury last year in Week 17, Jalen Samuels got like 8 targets to James Conner's 3. They also bring in Jalen Samuels, his college coach, his running backs coach from NC State, the guy who literally coached him to over 200 receptions. So he's going to know exactly how to implement Jalen Samuels into this offense, how to use him as a weapon, how to use him as a target out of the backfield. Juju Smith-Schuster also got tackled inside the 2-yard line 5 separate times last year. So there was a lot of luck going towards James Conner, and I think that's why he scored so many touchdowns, right? And if you watched yesterday's video with Noah and myself, we did like a blind resume thing where we put up stats and we wouldn't tell you who the players were. And we'd be like, oh, you know what? Like, that's crazy that looking at the numbers, you would think it's this guy versus this guy. It's an easy pick on player X, but that wasn't the case. One thing we did was look at James Conner's splits second half of the year versus first half of the year. He was averaging 1.3 rushing touchdowns a game over the first half of the year and then 0.5 over the second half of the year. And I think a lot of that had to do with luck. Last year, James Conner had more goal line carries in 2018, more goal line carries than Le'Veon Bell did in his entire last 3 full seasons playing as a Pittsburgh Steelers goal line or running back. So not 2018, 2017, 2016, 2015. All of those years combined, Bell's goal line carries did not equal up to what James Conner had last year. I think there is like serious regression coming from James Conner in both the touchdown category and the pass catching category. So James Conner is a little bit risky to me, although he still will get a ton of carries this year. Dalvin Cook, of course, I have to acknowledge, as much as I love Dalvin Cook, I mean, the injuries are obviously there. The one thing I will say, though, so Dalvin Cook had the ACL tear, right? Those are not necessarily predictive injuries. Those are, I don't want to say fluky, but the ACL tear, we know from Dr. Morse that once you're 2 years removed from it, which he will be going into the season, he is not at risk to re-injure it. He's at full strength both mentally and physically. That won't affect his play going into 2019. And then he had the hamstring injury last year, right? So hamstrings, again, are fluky. If you don't rest them, you come back, you're going to re-injure them. So that's what we saw with Dalvin Cook. That's what we saw with Leonard Fournette. But the cause of most of Leonard Fournette's injuries, the reason why he gets hurt as soon as he gets a big workload, right? His ankle springs or this, that, and the other thing, is because the portions of his body that keep getting hurt are not as strong as they used to be, and they don't get better. They don't heal over a longer period of time. Whereas Dalvin Cook's had the ACL 2 years removed. He's good to go. Dr. Morse pegged him as one of his top 3 or 5 breakout running backs this year. So if he's not worried about his injury concern, I believe you put him as like a 2.5 out of 10 or a 3 out of 10 in the draft guide. I'm good for that. They also drafted Alexander Mattison, but I think it was literally because they have no other running backs on the roster. They had Rock Thomas, who got in some legal trouble off the field, and Latavius Murray obviously left in free agency, so they had to do something behind Cook. I don't think Madison's actually going to push him for any workload. And then you have a couple other guys that I would put at low risk. Actually, let's talk about Joe Mixon, because literally like 10 minutes before I filmed this, we had news that Jonah Williams, the first-round pick that the Bengals just invested into, the tackle out of Alabama, just destroyed his shoulder, and it looks like he's going to be out for the entire season. That's a massive, massive blow for this Bengals offense and for Joe Mixon. Mixon was a guy I was super high on. I had him ranked as my number 6 running back in last week's running back rankings video. And now that their line, which was a monster concern for a lot of people, is not going to be as strong as we had wanted it to be when they drafted Williams, that hurts, man. That really, 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 really hurts. And I'm probably going to have to drop him down into the next tier because he was someone I was ready to, go all in on. And they had the improved offensive line with Williams there. They got the new OC and new head coach, which we don't know if it's going to work out, but we know that at least it's going to be a little bit more up-tempo than we have expected from Marvin Jones. So this definitely makes Joe Mixon a medium risk, I would say, with the injury to Jonah Williams, who was looking to really, really shore up this offensive line that had been a weak point. And then you have the guys that I mentioned before, Marlon Mack, Aaron Jones, Kerryon Johnson. I don't think necessarily any of them are that risky. Their biggest risk is probably running back by committee, and I think the hype of them falling into running back by committee is a little bit more overblown than the reality for all three. I mean, Kerryon Johnson competing with C.J. Anderson. C.J. Anderson looked good last year in the Rams offense. Any running back is going to look good in that Rams offense. Marlon Mack, dude, for people that were like, he's going to split time, he's not going to be the workhorse there. They've said nothing but the fact that he's going to be a workhorse. They literally didn't draft a running back. They did not bring in anyone during free agency outside of Spencer Ware, like 3 months into free agency. This is all Mack's backfield. They did nothing to say that this is not Mack's backfield. So I don't think he's really risky, other than we don't know the passing workload that he's going to have, but I think he's almost a lock. He's like Devonta Adams. He's locked for like double-digit touchdowns on the ground this year. Aaron Jones is the one that I would say is the most risky because we've actually never seen them commit to Aaron Jones as the workhorse. Whereas Kerryon Johnson, they keep saying running back by committee. But last year, when you look at the game logs, as soon as he became like the starting running back in that offense, it was all his. He was getting 20-plus touches a game. So we've seen them commit to him. Had he not gotten hurt, had he not suffered that knee injury that ended the year last year, Kerryon Johnson would have been the workhorse there, despite what they're saying that they want to use a running back by committee. So, whereas they're saying it for both parties, both Kerryon and Aaron Jones, we've actually already seen them commit to Kerryon Johnson. Whereas Aaron Jones, they just seem to, no matter what, want to give the ball to Jamal Williams. I don't know if it's going to be Jamal Williams. I don't know if it's going to be Dexter Williams, which Williams beats out the other one for the big back here. Also, Aaron Jones is a smaller running back too. So he's dealt with his injuries. He's dealt with his off-the-field concerns. Even if they gave him a workhorse load, can he sustain it for the entire year? So he's the most risky one out of these three, but I would argue that he has just as much upside, if not more, than these other two as well. But I like all three guys. I think they are a much lower risk than people are probably going to make them out to be, and I would take them in the third round over Leonard Fournette, over Devonta Freeman, over Todd Gurley. So those first three guys are the highest risk for me, and that's going to be all for this episode. Again, guys, if you enjoyed, make sure you hit that thumbs up button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're new. If you want all the big facts, the draft guide is where you'll get them. You will not have to look elsewhere this entire fantasy football season. I take all the content that I put out, all of the best content, and I mash it into one website for y'all, right? You don't ever actually have to watch my videos again because all the best stuff will be in this draft guide. BigDogsDraftGuide.com launches in 5 days. I cannot wait for y'all to see it. If you're on iTunes, subscribe to the podcast, leave a rating and review. 5 stars for your boy. And I'll see y'all tomorrow on Fade Public. Peace.